And if we draw out all the military bases the US has as well, the map will end up looking like this. But it's still not complete as it needs a final touch. And that final touch is the rest of the US military bases. So let me just draw those in green. Now, the reason I'm not marking these the same color as the rest of the US military bases is that according to the United States, these green dots are in bases. They're instead what's known as lily pads, which is a rather strange name to give what is essentially military bases. So let me explain what that means. Lily pads, also known as cooperative security locations, house either a single Astrid storage facility or a surveillance tower where drones can be deployed from, and they're called lily pads for a very specific reason, as they are typically a quick jump away from that target. And most importantly, don't cost as much to set up in comparison to a full-scale military base, meaning that these bases are simply too small to count in America's eyes. And to be fair, some of these lily pads are so small, they can barely be located via satellite surveillance, which is a good thing because that makes them the best and most affordable way for the US to expand its military presence without causing any trouble. Well, maybe that was a lie. But we'll get into that in a bit. You just need to know that the US likes bases a lot, and they aren't so keen on telling us about them, especially the smaller ones. But so far, we've only discussed Africa, and this is far from the only place the US government has planted these lily pads. They've also been placed in remote areas across Honduras and Caracas Islands that lie off the coast of Australia, as many as 15 facts that we know of at least, and to be honest, there's most likely a lot more. I know this because the US technically keeps track of all their overseas military bases and the Pentagon as well as the Department of Defense state. The US has an estimated 514 bases in 45 countries, while everyone else is stating that that number is closer to 800. And it could be way more if you count what is known as black sites and unofficial military support sites like the one on Diego Garcia and the Checkers Islands. And this is where we get into the true insanity of the United States military base strategy. See, from an aerial view, this island looks like your next vacation destination. But don't be fooled, because as you move closer, the block buildings and strange structures reveal the results of billions of dollars state secrets and some pretty gruesome forced evictions, all to establish their space. Diego Garcia is, however, a precious territory on the Indian Ocean. But since it's close to the Middle Eastern region that the US has a vested interest in, they decided they really wanted it. And they wanted it so bad, in fact, that they began mass evictions of all their goals known as check oceans. And just so we're on the same page here, the US and UK governments labeled this island as uninhabited to the public. So we knew nothing about this. And the things that happened here are so gruesome, they are hard to talk about. I mean, they went as far as gassing the locals' pet dogs as a show of seriousness. So yeah, that negotiations were deported to Mauritius and the Seychelles, which, by the way, is ridiculously far away from their homeland. And today, they make of some of the poorest in their exiled countries, and recent campaigns for locals to return home have been ignored or swept under the rug. Billions of dollars were poured into the Navy and Air Force base here, as well as a secret on a knowledge CIA black site from this base. The Gulf War, the Iraq invasion and the Afghanistan war were waged without knowledge of the greater public. And thanks to those evictions, there were no human witnesses outside the UK and US military. Truly gruesome, insane, but also, I guess, quite effective. This same site did, however, come under international scrutiny for allegedly hosting a rendition program, which means it was a torture and detainment facility that made the reports coming out of Guantanamo Bay seem like light reading. But worst of all, Diego Garcia is still in operation today. And it's a blueprint for newer sites like the one in Turku Nisha, connected to a small commercial airport in the Sahara. This nameless space was initially built as a small launching pad for drone strikes that would affect aerosols in the North and West African region. The base has had little recorded drone activity, but it has all the necessary tools should the occasion arise, as recent satellite imagery has revealed an MQ-9 Reaper drone that can be launched to nearby Libya, Somalia and even Yemen, where American troops are few. The same MQ-9 Reaper can be seen in another public base in Agadez Nisha, which is quickly losing as slowly past that is, as over $110 million has been spent to expand its facilities, though both phases are obviously growing. AFRICOM and CIA spokespeople declined commentary on the nature of their presence in these spaces, which, to be fair, I didn't really expect either way. I mean, why would they disclose anything to the public? The people who funded the whole thing. It don't be stupid. But the United States' bases are not just about drone strikes and tracking terrorists, even though that can seem like the case. But there are different types of bases, as bases like the mysterious Pine Gap in Australia hosts the world's most secretive intelligence gathering bodies. Officially, though, Pine Gap is a collaborative effort between the Australian Department of Defence and the Pentagon's Defence Advanced Research Projects Agency. That was a long name unofficially, though. Pine Gap is a CIA surveillance center equipped with satellite surveillance technology, watchtowers, and, of course, the NSA. It obviously sounds like a conspiracy. But this site has been exposed as one of the major hubs that facilitate phone blogging and spying on other countries. It's mostly run by the Department of Defense, with most Australian legislators knowing little to nothing about what really goes on here is truly astonishing. And if you would like to know more about the NSA, CIA and the next generation of war, I recommend you go watch Cyber War, a really interesting documentary on CuriosityStream that takes you into the world of cyber hacking, where the weapon of choice is computer code. You learn how hackers are threatening everything from your bank account to the nation's secrets, and it's truly a great watch. But if you're not into that, CuriosityStream has recovered with a lot more to offer, since it's the entertainment brand for people who want to know more. Alright, so the US-based strategy is completely insane. But if you ask them why it's necessary, they will always say something along the lines of it's for national security and global peace or whatever, which is great. And I would love it if world peace became a reality. But considering we know for a fact, the United States already has more bases around the world than all other nations combined. And they still haven't achieved anything close to world peace that might not be in the realm of opportunity. But let's see, what amazes me though, is the fact that the US military has a presence in nearly every nation on Earth. And that's seen as normal, fun. It's almost unthinkable to imagine a foreign base on US soil. I mean, it just goes to show how good the US is at negotiating and collaborating with these nations. And it seems no matter how prickly the deal is, they'll happily set up a base quickly and efficiently, especially when focusing on new threats like China and Russia, as is the case in the Philippines, where the US was secretly operating over 600 troops in the southern region for years. The same goes for this tiny island famous for his role in World War II. It's called Tinian Island, and it had a recent renovation when the US rebuilt an old runway to increase its presence in the Pacific. So once we do know of a lot of bases like this one, the Pentagon will likely never reveal how many secret bases exists, as no comment has become the preferred answer whenever we find a new one. But you might be wondering, what about the nations that have made it very clear they don't want the US military on their soil, like China, North Korea, Russia, and Iran? Well, here a different approach is taken. Meet the floating base, also known as an aircraft carrier. And what you see here is a base that sinks on purpose, also known as a submarine. Now, aircraft carriers as well as submarines serve as mobile military bases that fill in the gaps where the US isn't welcome, and they complement each other quite well. Since the aircraft carrier can only get so close to the shore before he gets shot at, the submarine can still only go as close as it dares, which can be quite useful since the mere presence of the US military in a tense standoff can sometimes be enough to end things. For example, when mainland China came under international scrutiny when it deployed its military aircraft into Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone. The US Navy was not far off in the South China Sea to help asset deterrent. I mean, when you have the Navy fleet and the highly armed USS Ronald Reagan supercarrier, the message is pretty clear: intervention will probably happen if necessary. And as long as the United States respects international motor boundaries, this is legal and quite effective. But when they want to do something a little less legal, for example, when they want to get closer without getting blown up, well, then they have the USS Sea Wolf diving at over 490 meters. The USS Sea World class is not a vessel you'll hear of often, and with good reason. Its movements are completely untraceable, and it's powered by a nuclear reactor, which makes it able to run for decades without refueling. There are three rumors: civil submarines, and rumored is truly the right word to use here because the location movements and confirmed sightings are few and far between, as the Seawolf hasn't been sighted in yours. And the closest we've come to seeing it in action is an awkward encounter with a polar bear in 2003. And I know this sounds like something out of a James Bond movie, but it's just one of the many defense tactics the United States uses. What's kind of strange, though, is the fact that this submarine has its own website, but it's blocked for civilians like you and me. And I guess that's totally fair. But why even have a website like that to begin with? Why not at the very least call it something else? But anyway, the USS Sea Wolf has only had a few recorded movements through his lengthy time in service, and one of those movements was quite curious, as it sold the USS Seawolf deployed from Bremerton Port in Washington, only for it to appear in Norway just a month later. And when you look at a map, it's hard to draw a route from Washington to Norway that could be accomplished in just a month with submarine speeds. But that's because the US Seawolf didn't take a normal route. Instead, it's traveled on the Arctic ice, which is just another